Come laugh, learn, and love with us, your hosts, Peter and Teresa Martin. We're going to share stories, insights, everything on how to strengthen your marriage. We're going to have a lot of fun because we've got wisdom to share as long as it's shared with humor and maybe a glass of Italian red. Join us now for the next episode of Love That Lasts. Hello, friends. Welcome to Love That Lasts. We're your hosts, Peter and Teresa Martin.
And we're here today to talk to you about something that's dear to our hearts, mostly because we've just learned about it within the past decade and are studying it even more and are finding that it is a bit of a secret in the theology of marriage, in the sense that it seems it hasn't been fully untapped. And that topic is conjugal spirituality.
Conjugal, what? A lot of people say, I can't believe you're using that term. Why would you call it conjugal spirituality and not just like spousal spirituality? And part of it is because St. John Paul II and the Polish community around him used that term. And as we unpack it, you'll see that the beautiful thing about marriage is that it's a very corporal sacrament, right? Like the two become one flesh.
Right.
And yet there's also a beautiful spiritual element. So it's like the physical and the spiritual coming together. And so that's why we call it conjugal spirituality and following that line of thinking. But JP2, so in our book, if you haven't got it before, it's called The Rule, St. John Paul II's Rule for a Joy-Filled Marriage of Divine Love. And you can get that on our website, jp2rule.com. But we have
get this coffee cup there too.
Oh yeah, you can get the mugs. But there are 3 texts in our book that are the first time they've been published in English. They were rediscovered, texts that St. John Paul II himself wrote, rediscovered during his cause for canonization. And what these texts give us, one is this rule for married couple groups, and the 2 other are also about marriage, written around the same time. And they help us expound on what is this conjugal spirituality. And it starts with him showing us that there are 2 unique things about marriage.
Yeah. And when Teresa and I were preparing for marriage, one of the things that actually got us to where we are today is that we felt that the preparation was inadequate. And in particular, the concept of the fact that this is a sacrament. We just felt like they didn't say much about that.
Yeah.
And we knew, because we had studied theology, we knew more about it, but we were just hopeful that we would hear more about how we receive God's grace in the sacrament of matrimony, how that grace is available at all times. But it just seemed like that wasn't talked about as much as communication and family of origins, which are all great things, which is why we covered them in previous podcasts. But we wanted to know more, or we wanted people to know more about the way that the grace of the sacrament is available at all times. And when we learned more about conjugal spirituality, we realized there's even more to it than just having grace at all times. We learn that there's something that happens when we marry that brings the 2 of us together in a sacramental way, where God is able to give us grace, not just individually, which I think is how I understood it, that God would give me the grace to be patient or to be loving, whatever it might be. But in what we're learning with conjugal spirituality is that God's giving us the grace as a couple to become more of who we're meant to be. So let's get into it.
Yeah. But just real quick, I loved how you brought in the layers of communication, like those natural things are really good. So we're not dismissing that. Obviously, like Pete said, that's why we just talked about it in our podcast, those communications, but, and grace builds on nature. So you're not going to just rely on the sacrament of the grace
Right.
of the sacrament of marriage. You do need to do those things, but understanding this gift of grace in the sacrament is another level. So hopping right in, there's two things that are unique about marriage. And the first is that in every other sacrament, one person enters into what St. John Paul II calls an orbit of grace with God. So you have one person entering in this orbit of grace with God at baptism, confirmation, Eucharist. So you have this relationship with God personally. Marriage is the only sacrament where there are two people then who enter into this orbit of grace with God. And he says, in that entering in, a new relationship is formed
Mm.
between the Blessed Trinity and the spouses spiritually united as one. So Peter and I will always have our own personal relationship with God. That will always be there. But now we have another avenue to God united together spiritually. And that's what he calls this relationship is what he calls conjugal spirituality. And it can be so great, he says, because you can open your heart more specifically to this grace. And he says that this grace can bind you so beautifully that you actually share one interior life. And we're still unpacking what that means and still studying. I'm actually studying for my doctorate in order to fully and more fully unpack what this means. Do you want to talk about the second?
Yeah, but just to add a little bit to that, all of the sacraments are meant to draw us closer to God. But clearly, holiness is not just something that's meant for us. Holiness is meant to draw us out towards others, to love the way Christ did. So there's that, but then there's also these two particular sacraments, sacraments of holy orders and of matrimony, that are meant to be at the service of communion. So at the service of the church, at the service of others. So a lot of people think they get married for their own sake, which I hope that's the case, right? But the church wants us to see is that the sacrament of marriage is meant for others. It's meant for your family. It's meant for your neighbors. It's meant to be so that extra grace. It's not like, oh, good, we get more for ourselves. It's we get more, yes, for ourselves, but so that we can be a testimony to God's love to others. So that's the beauty of it also is that that added grace that we get, and you said it very well, that we receive grace through the other sacraments as we go to confession and receive Holy Communion. But marriage, that grace is available at all times so that we can love one another, yes, but that our love then would be at the service. So people recognize when you're receiving that grace, they can see. And marriage is meant to be an image of God. We're a little trinity,
Yeah.
right? So Father, Son, Holy Spirit, we've got Father, Mother, and Child. So we then become for others a witness to God's goodness, or we should. So the second thing about marriage that we, as little 21 and 22-year-old Catholic nerds already knew, but that was the fact that Father was not marrying us. We were marrying one another. So this sacrament is the only one where the primary actors of the sacrament are the husband and wife. So we are the ones who give the sacrament to one another by our vows. We are able to receive the sacrament. Father's there to witness that the sacrament took place. The beautiful thing about that JP2 points out is that this doesn't end on your wedding day, that for the rest of your married life, you continue that exchange, that giving of one another. And in that, you're enacting God's love. So by my love to my spouse, God is also present there and he loves Teresa through my weak love, and then he supplies more grace. And that's a thing that we've found that's just blown us away, because when you see it that way, you start to realize that it's not simply me loving Teresa, But because of that sacramental grace and that particular uniqueness of the sacrament, of how we give the sacrament to one another, God then is constantly doing the same. He's showing up in our acts of love, and he's loving Teresa through my love. It's a beautiful little uh, understanding that helps us more deeply recognize the need for us to strengthen our love.
And it really is mind-blowing to think that you are this conduit of the action of God, of God's grace for your spouse. So, and the more that you're open to that grace, the more God's grace can flow through you. And it's priestly in a sense because we are the ministers of that sacrament.
Yeah.
And so just as the grace flows through the priest when he consecrates the bread and wine and turns it into the body and blood of Jesus, like God is using his priestliness, his gift there to make this transformation, to be this conduit of God's grace. I mean, God is the one doing the miracle, right? But he's using the priest. He chooses to use the priest to do that. He could come down and turn bread and wine into body and blood on his own. He could like appear and do this, but he chooses to use holy and good priests. And in the same way, he chooses to use you in your marriage. And he chooses to use us and to work through us. And so like this ministering of the sacrament continues onward. Like Pete said, we were those nerdy ones who like corrected people. Actually, Father Smith didn't marry you. You married each other. But to think that it continues beyond that, that's what's mind blowing. And it's all this kind of dynamism of that conjugal spirituality relationship. And so not only do we have this, okay, we're united spiritually and have a connection to God. And it's like this simple thing, but this spiritual uniting is kind of like flowing through Peter to me and through me to Peter. And God's love is flowing through us back and forth and back and forth. And, you know, a mistake I think I made when we first got married was thinking I would have to like take turns loving Pete
Mm.
or loving God. Like I, you know, like, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but it was this weird thing in my head. I'm like, okay, I'm focusing on God now. Now I'm focusing on Pete now. And it was just, I don't know why, but like I did this pivot thing. But when you understand conjugal spirituality, you realize there is no pivot. When I love Pete, I am loving God. And the more that I love God, the more that I do love my husband. And when I receive Peter's love, I'm receiving the Father's love. I'm receiving God's love in a tangible, real, touchable way. And that is such a gift. What other vocation allows God to enter into our life in such a tangible
Mhm.
and physical way?
Yeah, and it's also mind blowing to know that God is there present when we're folding the laundry.
Yeah.
Something so simple, something so mundane, but yet God is there in it. And so the question is, well, how do you access that? How do you make that better? I, I guess the first thing would be awareness that you're offering whatever service you're giving to your spouse, you're offering that freely as a gift and not begrudgingly. And the more you recognize our job is to die to ourselves so that the other can live the life that they're meant to live. And people think, oh, well, then you're just wasted. Your life is all washed up. But the reality is the more you die to yourself, the fuller. So I'm thinking of a gas tank, and you think, oh, well, if I give everything, then my gas tank is empty. Not with God, not at
Right.
all. And that's
That's
the
the human
beautiful
thinking,
thing.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that's kind of the mind blow is that, hey, the more I give, the more I receive. God doesn't say, well, you're empty now, and that's too bad. But no, as we give and empty ourselves, God fills us up with Him. So then when you give of yourself, and then God fills you with his supernatural grace, you're becoming more of who you're meant to be. You're becoming the person that in baptism we were called to, right? So in baptism, there's a death that occurs, which is why they had the full immersion, because you
Mhm.
come out of the water a new person.
I forgot that.
So
That's
on
beautiful.
my day of baptism, I went in a pagan Peter Martin, but I came out the son of God
Mm,
who was destined to be with God. But also, there's that priestly role in all of us that we're meant to be another Christ. And people think, oh, well, that's for father and maybe
right.
the religious sisters. But no, what we said in a previous podcast is that we're all called to holiness. We're all called to be Christ to others. That's obviously what it means to be Christian. I'm not saying anything you don't know, but what is unique about what we're discovering in the rule is that this is something that we can deepen the more we understand it,
Yeah.
for one, and then the more we live it out. And so I was saying this recently. People ask, well, how do you deepen your conjugal spirituality? And in our married couple groups, we have a conjugal spirituality challenge for the week that all the couples follow. And you would think that, oh, that must be like a special novena, or you have to pray on your knees for X number of hours. It's not. It's the simple things
It's fun.
of having a date night,
Yeah.
of doing something fun for your spouse once this week, something out of the ordinary. All those things help deepen our conjugal spirituality because we start to become attuned to the fact that it's not just me in my cleverness loving Teresa, but it's God giving me inspiration, helping me to know when to maybe have more patience, to
Yeah.
be more loving. And that is an amazing thing. And that's when you start to realize that, wait, God has a hand in this. And then you start to say, all right, God, what does Teresa need from me right now? Then all of a sudden the inspiration comes and you become the spouse that you've always wanted to be. It's absolutely incredible.
And there's a couple things going on. Is this God in himself, in the Trinity, it has this self-giving mode. So God the Father gives his life and love to God the Son, who receives that life and love from God the Father, and from all eternity to all eternity gives the life and his life and love back to God the Father. And their love united is so powerful that it is the Holy Spirit, a third person. So there's this dynamism in God himself. And as we each are called in our own vocation, right? But those of us who are called to marriage, in our vocation, we become like the image and likeness of God when we do indeed give ourselves away in love. And like Pete said, like from a secular point of view, you could be like, hold on, wait a minute, you should like keep some for you. Don't hold back a little
Right.
bit. You can't give everything and expect to be filled or whatever. You're just going to be running on empty, right?
Hmm.
And this isn't a matter of we're not talking about like being a doormat or um, abusive situations. Is not what we're talking about. We're talking about when two couples are both working towards opening their hearts to
Mm,
this grace,
mm,
and and the difference is that God is in this relationship,
mm,
and you can trust the Father. He is a good Father, and when you give yourself completely in this relationship, St. John Paul II says, you are not lost. Your personality is not lost,
right.
but perfected in this union. And
Mm,
so it's amazing because the more, and even in, Vatican II documents, they talk about this, and in Gaudium et Spes, that you become who you're meant to be. The more you give yourself away in love
mm,
is when you truly find
yeah.
yourself. And
I'm thinking of
yeah, go ahead.
the death of Christ. So the passion and death, where he's bloodied and giving everything, falls 3 times, is crucified. And somebody points out that, this is the man. Like, this is who we're meant to be. This act of sacrifice is what we're all called to. It seems like, boy, that's really dramatic.
That's depressing.
But the reality is, every family, every marriage goes through a time of suffering. So maybe it's a loss of a loved one, maybe it's a miscarriage, maybe it's just really difficult times financially. Everyone goes through this, and we're all called to give of ourselves and then trust in the Lord. That's the hardest part, to trust that this sacrifice that I'm making has any meaning, has any purpose at all. And what Christ, obviously, why we are an Easter people, is that he showed that absolutely this has meaning. This is who we're meant to be. So after the sacrifice, after giving all, we are resurrected.
Yeah.
And so that's all a part of it as well, is these little dying to selves might think, it might feel like hell. It might feel like, this is ridiculous. I didn't sign up for this. Marriage was supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be heavenly bliss, but this is not anything near that.
Are you saying that I'm not heavenly bliss?
There's been a time or two in the last 25 years, but the reality is that's our human side.
Yeah.
And when we trust in the Lord and give it all over, even that difficult time, he will take that and there will be a resurrection. And you could talk to any couple that's been married for more than 10 years. They've experienced that.
Yeah.
Because you know, the first 5 years it's rough, but you're working out the kinks, and you're getting kind of into the rhythm. But inevitably, in those first 10 years, something happens that kind of sweeps everything out from underneath you, and the things that you thought you knew all of a sudden are questioned.
Yeah.
And the reality is that you hold on and you continually give. And that's, I think, maybe we're being tested at that moment to say, show your love completely, show that you are in. And that's why we always say marriage isn't a 50-50 arrangement where we do half and she does half, but it's 100%. You're constantly giving 100%. And when you recognize that in God's math, you never go empty, you start to give it your all more frequently, because you realize that Gaudium et Spes is absolutely true. The
Yeah.
more I give myself away, the more I receive.
And the beautiful thing that starts to happen is that when you don't hold back, but the thing is like I'm giving my all to love Pete and to care for him the best I can, and vice versa. A- And it gets to this point where I don't have to worry about um my me time or taking care
Mm,
of myself, or I don't need to hold back and hold on to those things, because that's Peter's job to take care of me, right? And sometimes, and like even now, like he takes care of me probably better than I would, because I put myself after everybody else and after the kids and after him, and so that when you're both trying to love each other more every single day, and be that continual student of your spouse every single day, and laying your life down for each other, is when you both feel fulfilled. That's the fun part, right? Like when you're outdoing each other in these acts of love and these acts of laying your life down, then one of St. John Paul II's good friends, Professor Stanislav Griegel, was one of the first professors hired to teach at the St. John Paul II Institute. He taught uh, anthrop- philosophical anthropology,
yeah,
and he talks about, like Pete said, like there's this sacrifice, there's this death to yourself, but then there's a resurrection.
yeah.
And Professor Griegel says that this relationship, this conjugal spirituality, is that when you give yourself so completely, you die to yourself. There is a death, and like love is sacrificial, but you are reborn in the heart of your spouse.
Mm,
You are reborn in the heart of your spouse. And that for me, even just like ruminating on that. Like, it is a beautiful thought. So even when I'm not near Peter, when he's not near me, we carry each other in our hearts.
Yeah. And it's completely opposite of the world
Yeah.
because what does the world tell us happiness consists of? Gathering up things. I saw horrible. So obviously, we have 8 children. We do not have the sticker that announces that on our back window. Not that that would be a bad thing, but yeah, I was just opposed to it. We already have a 15-passenger van. I think they know
That
we have a
announces
lot
it
of
enough.
kids. So, but I saw one that I was just like, yeah, that's ugly, but yet that's the world. And it was a husband and wife, and behind, instead of children, it was money bags
What?
to say, hey,
For
we
real?
we don't have kids,
We
and
have
so
lots of
therefore
money,
we have money. And I thought, how sad, because in the end, that money will not bring you happiness. Sure, it'll
and
bring you distractions.
it doesn't go with you.
It'll bring you things, but
Yeah.
those things, they won't be there during crisis. The money won't help you. And so, yeah, that's the world we live in. But what we know is that, yeah, you don't have to be wealthy to be happy. We had my brother on at the last podcast, and he's shared with me he's been with many people who are dying, and he said not once did anyone say, "I wish I would have made more money."
Wish I would
But
have been in the office longer.
what they
No.
say is, "I wish I would have had more kids."
Mm,
That's that's what we're called to, and I think we all know it. We're meant to be a gift. And in the marital relationship, the more we give ourselves as a gift, if God wills it, the more we have children, and that ability to die to ourselves and to make our lives not about us, that's what makes a difference. So recently, and the Cara report comes out every year about this time, talking about the newly ordained class. And to no surprise to me, almost all of them grew up with a mother and father who remained married throughout their
mm,
childhood. And what that tells me is that, yes, that's the example that they need to be able to consider God's calling to give their lives for others, because they see it in mom and dad. That
yeah.
mom and dad, they gave their all. They gave their all to each other, but to us as well. And so then what does a young man think? But yeah, I can sacrifice as well.
So your marriage, working on your marriage and working on, pouring into your own love, it seems like it might be a selfish act, but it's really not.
Mm,
Like, when you have a strong marriage, that is a gift to your children, that is a gift to others around you, and maybe, like, we've always, been working on our marriages, like, we felt from the time we were engaged, we felt God asking us to put our marriage at the service of the church. And so we have. And so we had been working and being intentional with our communication and purposeful and striving to have a holier marriage. But it wasn't until we started living the rule and following this rule for married couple groups that St. John Paul II wrote, when this kind of this conjugal spirituality part of our marriage like leveled up. And honestly, it's not a matter of, ooh, I'm going to have a better marriage and I can check that box and say, hey, I've got a better marriage. No, it's not about that. It's about being able to finally cross that line from white knuckling your faith and kind of, I don't know, doing this dance between secular mentality and an all-in Christian mentality. I'm not quite sure, but it's also the support of the other couples in that group,
mm,
because sometimes you can kind of get, um, I said, he said, she said, he said, like, you get kind of stuck in your own marriage. And
right.
then maybe as a wife, maybe I don't want to like call Pete out on things because I don't want to be the one keeping him accountable. And he doesn't want to like fuss on me. You know what I mean? So then we could like give it a rest, but then if you're in a married couple group and everyone's being called to do this challenge this week,
Mhm.
and so it's not just you harping on your spouse or something, it's like a group effort, and so we all grow and we're all reminded
Right.
and we have this positive peer pressure. And the point that I'm trying to get to is that the more that you become who you're meant to be, so this self-giving love, the more that you're fulfilled. And in that fulfillment, you find joy.
Yeah.
And you find joy, joy, joy. And it's amazing. And it honestly, it's still this Easter. We're the Easter people. We should be celebrating in joy. We should be living in joy, even in the hard times. There's this joy that we live in Christ. And Peter and I are connected in God. And the more that we give ourselves away in love, the more that we find this joy. And it's joy is not something that you aim for, like you're grasping at,
Right.
because that's like the kind of joy slash happiness of the world. That's when
Yeah.
you want the money bags and you
Yeah.
think this is going to buy you some kind of happiness. But in God's eyes, which is totally like opposite from ours, the more we give ourselves away in this love, the more we find this like reintegration of our personhood and become more a reflection of the image of God. And in that, joy comes.
Joy follows. Yeah. So you mentioned Professor Griegel, and he has a quote on the back of our book. We were blessed to speak with him, and he helped us to write the book. He's the one who translated the rule into Italian. He was my professor when I studied at the JP2 Institute in Rome, and a very dear man. And we're so grateful that we had time with him before he passed. Now, he passed away a few years ago already, and we also know his wife, and we're in communication with her. She's a very dear woman. But when Stanislaus passed away, she said, what did she say, Teresa?
She said, I reached out to her because we dedicated the book in part to the two of them, and he passed away just after the book was finally published, like within the week, actually.
Hmm.
And so I sent it to her and I just said how much we love her. And she wrote back and she said, it's just hard to live with half your soul gone.
Yeah,
And he understood this conjugal spirituality, and
right.
I'm sure they obviously lived it. You could tell that they just
Yeah,
radiated this joy. And then when he went on to heaven ahead of her, there's this huge piece missing because they were so united. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means
correct.
how beautiful their
And
love was.
and it's not to say because she's hurting that this is
Right.
utter sadness. There's absolute sadness, but she also knows the truth that my beloved is not with me now.
Yeah.
But she, I'm sure, hopes that one day we'll be together again. It's just a beautiful testimony to that depth of what's actually taking place in marriage. And I just want to end by saying, if you're interested in learning more about what conjugal spirituality is, you can find out more about how to be a leader couple for a married couple group. We're going to be doing another training. We'll take the summer off, but before that, if you look on our website and find our marriage retreats, you might find one that's near you. And that's a great way to experience, because in our retreats we try to allow the couples to experience this conjugal spirituality. And then finally, obviously, you could purchase the rule and read more about it, but obviously we would say that experience is best. And to be honest, I, yeah, to get into a married couple group, I I can't speak more highly. JP2,
It's been one of the greatest blessings in our
he
marriage.
knew what he was doing, and it's something that no matter where you are in marriage, I feel that it will take you to places that you never thought you could be. And it's not, so we've said this a lot, we'll say it again, it's not a group therapy.
No,
We're all just sinners sitting around trying our
we're all
best.
sinners.
We're trying our best to make this marriage thing what it's meant to be. And the thing is you think, oh well, who needs to fuss and who needs to do all that, I've got other things. But when you get that right, everything falls into place, and that's where the joy comes, is that
It's just
our marriage has never been better, and because of that, our family life has never been easier in the sense that our children are happy.
that the
uh
tension is reduced. And that and these groups, they're not a book study. So it's not some like intellectual journey. You do learn, but it's JP2 knew personhood and he knew what it meant to be a person. And he's like the doctor of knowing how to reintegrate that personhood. It's a simple format to follow. And yet
mhm.
through this, that there's this reintegration and yes, like we become more of who we're meant to be and joy follows. So um your conjugal spirituality challenge for this week would be to take your spouse on a date night and do something fun, do something creative, something that you, even if it's a date night in, if maybe you don't have money to go out, that's okay. But do something creative where you're spending time and having time in that dinner or that date to just talk about your own desires for your marriage
Yeah,
and what's deep on your heart and listen, which is huge, right?
yeah.
So not only talk but listen carefully to each other and so that you can both grow in understanding how you each need to be loved and then being able to be that beautiful receptive place for each other.
And if it's been a while, it would be really awesome if the 2 of you are watching this together, that would be great, but if one of you is the one that instigates the date night, uh, make sure you say that, "I just want to let you know how much I love you," because a
Yeah.
lot of times we figure they know, right? We figure, "Yeah, we've been together for all these years,
I
of
told you
course
I
you
love you
know,
10 years
of
ago.
course you know I
Don't you
love you."
remember that?
But let them know that this is just an opportunity for me to share the fact that I love you. And yeah, we just sometimes we miss those
Yeah.
opportunities. I've been listening to a lot of country music. There's a lot of sappy songs on there, but there's a Garth Brooks song that says, "If tomorrow never comes, will she know how much I loved her?" That's I'm in the garage crying, so stupid.
Aw.
But it was just one of those reminders of, yeah, I gotta make sure that not just my wife, but my children know that I love them.
Yeah.
Because you never know. I mean, please God that none of us suffer an immediate and yeah, untimely death. But obviously, we know that it's coming, and so you can never tell someone that
No.
you love them too much, unless you're smothering them, I suppose.
I love you, babe.
I love you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
God
Have a
bless
great
you.
day. Bye.
Bye bye.